Roughly 3 months ago, I asked y'all if you want to hit for a lot of damage with the Koshai axe. And today, I'm asking y'all if you want to hit for even more damage with the Koshai axe because it did get buffed recently, which is a nice buff in all honesty. And there's also a bit more understanding about one of the most important amps in Shock Escalation. So today's video is going to be just about a general build to I don't know, maybe one-shot Malkarian or one-shot round 4 Behemoths, just small things like that, very, very small things like that. It really shouldn't come as a shock to most people, but the axe is a really good weapon for hitting for just really big numbers. That's sort of how it's been going on for a long time now. It's happened ever since open beta. Beta? What's a beta, dude? It's ever since open beta, and it's lasted until now. That's just a weapon you use if you want to hit for big numbers. That doesn't always mean it's the most practical or that those big numbers will kill behemoths, but in this case, they kind of do. So it's a nice little change from the past, I guess. And speaking of the past, I'm about to go against something that I've said for a long time, which is still mostly correct. It's just that in this kind of case, it's a little bit different, and there's a, sort of like an exception to the rule in this sort of situation. And that is that part damage will help you do real damage. And I know those are some cursed words, a cursed combination of words even, but it's true. In this case, there is some really strange interaction with Virulent Impact and part damage, because Virulent Impact, which is an amp in Escalation, which makes it so whenever you critically strike, you'll deal 75% of that crit's damage to all behemoths. Whether it's one behemoth or more than one behemoth, it'll deal that crit's damage to all behemoths. After hearing that, you're probably like, oh, I should be stacking things like Predator, Overpower, Rage Hunter, Rage, all this crazy stuff, maybe get some crit chance to make it so I can actually crit. Well, kinda, but not really. You do need crit chance to actually crit, that's true. Like, I'm not gonna tell you no to that. But you don't need to stack just raw damage because it's off of displayed damage. That means part damage isn't a bad option here, specifically Sharpened, because Sharpened gives you 30% more part damage, and if you roll to an attack, you'll get up to 50% more part damage on your next attack for some odd seconds. That is 80% extra part damage, which in this case is going to increase your displayed damage by a lot. And to add even more into that, if you're playing the axe, which in this case you freaking better be, alright, it's the build, I swear, man, you better be, then you are effectively using a slashing weapon. That means hitting the horns or the tail of Behemoth will deal 50% more part damage. Now, keeping all that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about the build in this video. And just for starters, we have the Koshai axe called the Sovereign's Wrath, which is a cool name, I like to say it. And this is an axe that has Sharpened on it, which normally isn't the best, but the cool thing is the unique effect. And I have to slow down really hard to say that and not make it sound like something that it shouldn't sound like. But moving swiftly past that, this effect makes it so after not dealing damage for 4 seconds, the next two attacks deal 50% increased damage. This used to be 25% increased damage, and it also took longer for the effect to even happen. But now it's been increased by double for the damage, and it is pretty freaking helpful for this build's purpose. The special I'm using is Grim Onslaught, and in the last video I used Relentless Onslaught. That was because there was a sort of bug, maybe someone would call it an exploit, who's to really say? But this bug, we're going to call it a bug, made it so Relentless Onslaught was pretty freaking good. Ever since it got fixed, it is no longer that great. So Grim Onslaught is just a better choice here for many a reason. Now, my modifier is going to be Overcharged Cylinder, and this is a mod you want if the fights you're doing are going to last a long time. In this case, Escalation lasts pretty much the longest out of any sort of game mode in Dauntless, so it is a good choice. As far as the armor goes, I'm using the Light's Crown for my helmet, Boreal Resolve for my chest, Boreal Might for my gloves, and Boreal March for my feet. So 3 Boreas pieces and 1 Reza piece. Now, real quickly, if you do not have Reza helmet, that's fine. You can swap it out for a Hellion helmet, and you should be good to go. Now, if you're playing in a group, I suggest doing that anyway, because if you have Conduit 3, it can overwrite Conduit 6, and Conduit 3 is less value, so it's not the best idea ever to do that. For the lantern choice, normally I say pick whatever you want to. In this case, I do suggest picking Draft's Lantern because of the cell I'm using, which is going to be Zeal, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Now for my potions, I'm using the Frenzy Tonic and Blitz Tonic, and that's just because Frenzy's more damage, and that makes sense, but Blitz is helpful because I do not have much attack speed in this build, which you'll come to find out. So that's kind of rough to play around. If you want to make it easier on yourself, just pop a Blitz Tonic or put a friend that's using repeaters, and they have the Captain's Grip. So those are 2 options you have. Now, you can also bring Pylons if you want to hit for as much damage as you pretty much can with this build. It's just up to you if you want to waste those kind of potions and whatnot. Now, onto the cells of the build, we have +6 cunning because this is 10% more crit chance, and you need that in your life, and it's also 30% more critical strike damage, which is a nice little benefit right there. +6 Iceborne, because you want that in Escalation. It is not that much fun to do Escalation without Iceborne. I will stand behind that until they freaking change how that feels, but it's really helpful to have that. +6 Rage, this is just more damage when you're below 50% health. It's helpful. +6 Sharpened, again, 30% more part damage, and if you dodge an attack, it's actually 100% extra part damage. I thought it was 50, I'm scuffed. So 100% extra part damage, that is cracked for this kind of build. And then +6 Zeal. This is 65% extra Lantern Tap ability effectiveness. This makes it so your Drast Tap, which is normally 30%, will instead increase to 50% extra damage for the next 6 seconds. And that is helpful because if you didn't have that, you'd instead have Conduit or Aetheric Attunement, and that doesn't give you extra damage. And that's kind of why Zeal is really helpful here. And it's going to be kind of rough for some of y'all if you're new, because you're going to need 2 +3 Zeal cells if you can. And that's going to take some time to get. Not a whole lot of time, but just RNG and some time. So hopefully you get it fast. If not, I apologize. But overall, this build is fun to play. And I will say, since we're already, halfway through the video, this is a very RNG-based build. The RNG is in the amps, it's also in the crits, and it's in the freaking behemoth behavior. The behemoths can sometimes just not do things you want them to do, and that's really annoying. And this is very evident when you're fighting Malkarian, because trying to hit Malkarian from the back, oh my goodness, it is difficult, brother. Like, that is not fun at all. That thing just doesn't want to play ball. Ever. The only time it was not that big a deal is if it slammed the ground and I was next to it. But I feel like its AI is just kind of scuffed, man, because it was just being really ridiculous. So I just want to make sure y'all understand that there is a lot of RNG risk involved with this build, because if you don't get the RNG you want, it isn't as satisfying as if you do get the RNG you want. Because when it works, when it does work properly, it is a lot of fun. Like, just one-shotting behemoths for all of their health is pretty good. And I think the most fun part about this build is getting round 4, getting a weak spot on a tail, dodging attack, and just yeeting the axe at the tail and killing both behemoths just off the bat. Like, that's the fastest I've ever killed anything in the game, just hands down. So that's a lot of fun. I enjoy that. And it took about 3 hours to have it happen, but hey, it was enjoyable. I liked it. And just so we're clear, just so we're on the same page here, I want y'all to understand that part damage outside of Escalation, outside of having Virulent Impact, is not going to make you do more damage. But in Escalation and with Virulent Impact will make you do more damage if you crit. Just want to make sure that we're all hunky-dory on that fact, because if anyone's like, Douglas said part damage is good, I will slap you with a sock, bro, I swear to God. And this is not a game, because every time I do something like this, someone takes one thing out of context and they hold it over me for freaking months. I made a repeaters guide a long time ago, and I said, you can use adrenaline on repeaters if you have nothing else. That is objectively true. And they're just like, Doe said adrenaline's good on repeaters, bro, poggers. So hopefully we're on the same page here. Y'all Roger my Dodger, and we're just good to go, because this is a fun build to play, and it's just outside of the ordinary of what you would normally do in Escalation, which right now is just a bunch of Blaze Escalation, and that can get kind of old. And it's just nice going into Shock Escalation and getting that wow factor of one-shotting behemoths, because that is pretty satisfying, if I do say so myself. Especially like whenever you can just Thanos snap Boreas out of existence without even touching it. It's so good. And there is one more tip I can give y'all, and that is that you have to be really, really conservative with your Grim Onslaught and saving it for the next round, because otherwise you won't be able to one-shot behemoths, since it requires having Determination at 4 stacks and having full meter to get the most damage out of your axe. And if you guys haven't noticed, behemoth bodies do not stay there and let you build meter off them for anywhere near as long as they used to. Instead, they're just like, poof, I'm gone, as soon as they start to disappear. And that's just going to make it a lot more difficult to get these sort of PogChamp one-shots during rounds. But the cool thing though is if you do get those, it's going to be admired by people, because not everyone can do it as easily. So that's a little food for thought. But anyway guys, that will wrap it up for the video. Hopefully it helped you, hopefully you learned something. And if it did, then make sure to hit the like button and maybe consider hitting the subscribe button to see more content like this, whether it's Dauntless and the inevitable Valorant content that I'm working on, which should be done sometime soon. And lastly, I do stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/OhDough. I don't always play just Dauntless, but for the most part I do right now. And if you want to, go over there, have a chat, maybe get some hunts in. And you can also get my Twitch flair or some just emotes if you want them. I'm a Twitch partner. I've got a couple of those. And you can get those things by being a sub, whether you have $5, a Twitch Prime, which is pretty much free, or you get gifted. Those are pretty much the ways you get it, and that's how it goes. But that's the video, guys. Hope you liked it. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.